what if you've been freezing your entire life, like huddled in a cold room, only to realize there was a space heater sitting right next to you the whole time, and all you had to do was turn it on? I mean, what if the universe is just waiting for you to flip the switch?
It is a really profound, almost frustrating question to ask yourself, isn't it? To realize the cold was always optional,
Right.
and that the suffering we just accept as our baseline might, simply be a case of mistaken identity regarding how the universe actually functions.
Absolutely. And that realization is exactly where we are heading today. Welcome to the Book Nook. I'm incredibly glad you're joining us for this deep dive because we are stepping into a piece of work that fundamentally challenges the mechanics of how we experience life. We're diving into E-squared, which is 9 do-it-yourself energy experiments that prove your thoughts create your reality by Pam Grout.
Yeah.
And I want to set the stage right away because, when you hear the phrase, your thoughts create your reality, it's very easy to just roll your eyes.
Yeah. Oh, it triggers an immediate, almost reflexive skepticism in a lot of people.
Hmm.
And understandably so, right?
Totally.
Because the self-help and spiritual genres, they're just saturated with vague concepts about the law of attraction or like the power of positive thinking. We've all been exposed to the idea that if we just visualize a sports car hard enough, it will suddenly materialize in our driveway.
Exactly. The whole just wish for it and it appears thing.
Right. But what makes this source material so compelling is that it explicitly rejects that kind of blind faith.
Yes. The author essentially says, do not take my word for this. In fact, don't believe anything I'm saying until you prove it to yourself.
Which is so refreshing.
It really is. Instead of just philosophical musings, the book is structured around actual falsifiable science experiments. These are 48-hour tests designed for you to conduct in your own life to prove whether or not what she calls the field of potentiality, the FP, is real.
Right. She treats this field as a force that's just as dependable as gravity or electricity.
Yeah.
And that framing is really crucial to everything we are going to discuss today. I mean, we don't wake up on a Tuesday and wonder if gravity is going to hold us to the floor today.
We'd be pretty stressed if we did.
Exactly. We don't sit in our kitchens agonizing over whether we are spiritually good enough or, worthy enough to plug our toaster into the electrical outlet. We just understand electricity is a neutral, available energy, and we just use it.
Yeah.
The premise we are testing here is that the field of potentiality is a 247 invisible energy force of infinite possibilities. And instead of plugging in, we're just sitting in the dark, shivering.
So let's talk about where that space heater metaphor actually comes from, because it's not just a clever rhetorical device. It stems from a very specific, very cold night in Pam Grout's own life.
Oh, the Easelin story.
Yes. So at 34 years old, she hit a wall. She had just gone through a devastating breakup with her longtime boyfriend, and she found herself in this abyss of just total despair. She was literally at a crossroads contemplating ending her life. Yeah, she was weighing the dark finality of slitting her wrists in a warm bath against an alternative option, which was attending a month-long work-study retreat at the Easelin Institute in Big Sur, California.
Which is just a stark, visceral demonstration of a mind that has collapsed its possibilities down to almost nothing. When we are in deep pain, our perception narrows so dramatically.
Yeah, right. But thankfully, she chooses Eastland. So on her second night there, she meets a former surfer named Stan. And they stay up late, they're talking and listening to the ocean, and they eventually fall asleep on these mats in one of the campus massage rooms.
But the weather isn't exactly tropical.
No. April winds coming off the Pacific Ocean are brutal. So even huddled together, the room is absolutely freezing. They spend the entire night just shivering, desperately trying to conserve body heat. She even mentions it almost solved her suicide dilemma right then and there because she was so cold.
I can imagine.
But then, the sun comes up, the dawn light fills the massage room, and she looks over, and right next to the mat where they had been freezing for 8 hours, there is a space heater.
Unbelievable.
And it was plugged in. It was fully functional. Literally, all she had to do was reach out her hand and push a button.
See, the physical environment hadn't lacked warmth at all. Her perception of the environment had just failed to locate the source of the warmth. And this perfectly mirrors our psychological and spiritual reality, doesn't it?
It really does.
We navigate our daily lives feeling so desperate. We're lacking resources, lacking love, lacking money, opportunity. We just feel overwhelmed by the sheer friction of existence, completely oblivious to the fact that the energy required to change all of those circumstances is sitting right beside us, waiting to be engaged.
It begs the obvious question, though. I mean, if this field of potentiality is everywhere, and if it's as readily available as a space heater, Why are we so profoundly disconnected from it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because it feels like if we had this immense power at our fingertips, we would be using it right.
Well, the disconnect isn't really spiritual. It's largely biological and neurological. You kind of have to look at the architecture of the human brain. According to cognitive neuroscientists, about 95% of our daily thoughts and actions are controlled by our pre-programmed subconscious mind.
95%. That's huge.
It's massive. We move through our day believing we are making these fresh, autonomous, conscious decisions, what to eat, how to react to a difficult email, who to trust. But in reality, we're essentially just playing recycled cassette tapes.
Oh, wow.
And the wild part is, many of those tapes were recorded and finalized before we were 5 years old.
So it's like we are running modern software on incredibly outdated, inherited hardware.
Precisely. We are reacting to the present moment based on conditioning that we absorbed from our parents, our culture, and our early childhood environments. We are locked into this mechanical worldview. And to understand why we are locked in, you really have to look at the sheer volume of data the brain is dealing with at any given moment.
Yes, the math on this is what really anchored the concept for me. Because your brain, right now, as you are listening to this deep dive, is receiving 400 billion bits of information per second from your environment.
It's almost impossible to conceptualize that number.
It really is. It's every sound, every shift in temperature, the feeling of your clothes against your skin, the subtle shifts in light, the background hum of your refrigerator, all of it.
To put 400 billion bits into perspective, imagine an average-sized paperback book, right? But it's filled entirely with zeros. Just pages and pages of zeros. Now imagine 600,000 of those books.
That's insane.
That is the amount of data hitting your sensory organs every single second.
But we obviously aren't consciously aware of 600,000 books worth of data. Like, we don't process 400 billion bits. Our brains have this built-in bouncer, a filtering mechanism called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The famous RAS.
Yep. And the RAS takes that 400 billion bits and aggressively, ruthlessly filters it down to a measly 2,000 bits. The author points out that if we actually tried to consciously process the entire 400 billion bits of data simultaneously, it would take us 821 years to process what happens in 1 single second.
Which means the brain absolutely must filter the data. Like, it's a biological necessity for survival. If you were consciously processing the molecular structure of the grass and the exact wind speed and the feeling of your digestion all at once, you wouldn't notice the predator creeping up behind you, right? The filter keeps you alive.
Right. I picture it kind of like a 2,000-bit dial-up modem from the 1990s trying to stream a 400 billion-bit 4K movie.
It's a great analogy.
The modem is screaming, it's struggling, and all it can manage to download is this tiny, heavily compressed, heavily pixelated fraction of an image. And we look at that lagging, blocky little square on our screen and we say, ah, yes, this is absolute reality.
We're so confident about it, too.
We are, but it's not. It's just the severely edited version our dial-up modem of a brain decided to let through.
That analogy perfectly highlights the central problem. We mistake the filter for the entirety of existence. And the critical question becomes, on what basis does the RAS decide which 2,000 bits to let in and which 399 billion plus bits to reject?
Right, like who programmed the bouncer?
We did, mostly out of cognitive laziness and an evolutionary drive for efficiency. When we learn something, our brains build neural pathways. Think of a neural pathway like a superhighway. The book uses this analogy of Interstate 70 driving straight through the state of Kansas.
Having actually driven through Kansas, I can tell you the reputation is that it is incredibly flat, completely straight, and endlessly boring.
Exactly. That is the prevailing perception.
Yeah.
But Interstate 70 was intentionally engineered to bypass all the interesting topographical features. Kansas actually has a miniature Grand Canyon. It has these massive ancient limestone formations like Castle Rock. It has rolling hills.
Wait, really? Kansas has a miniature Grand Canyon?
It does. But because the highway engineers wanted the easiest, flattest, most fuel-efficient route for mass transit, the road goes straight through the flattest terrain. So travelers drive the interstate, bypass all the beauty, and naturally conclude that Kansas is totally devoid of scenery. Our brains do the exact same thing with reality.
So we build these neural interstates that take the easiest, most familiar routes. And for most of us, the familiar route is a default setting of scarcity, fear, and just anticipating problems.
Unfortunately, yes.
We literally bypass the abundance, the joy, and the infinite possibilities around us simply because those things aren't located on our brain's established highway.
We don't see the space heater because space heater isn't a recognized destination on our internal GPS. We expect the cold, so our brain filters out anything that contradicts that expectation.
Which brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. Because if we have this severely compressed, heavily biased view of reality, how do we rebuild the highway? Like, how do we prove to ourselves that this field of potentiality is out there waiting to be used?
We can't just think our way out of it.
No, we have to test it. Let's look at the foundational tests that force us to plug in.
So the entry point is an experiment. The book titles The Dude Abides Principle. The fundamental hypothesis here is that the FP is a continuous 247 force, and it's equally available to every single person.
Right.
But before you can utilize it, you have to dismantle the cultural and religious baggage that is currently blocking your neural pathways. The author outlines what she calls the 8 whoppers about God.
Oh, these whoppers are deeply ingrained in our collective psyche. Even if you consider yourself entirely secular, they are the underlying assumptions of our culture. It's the idea that God, or the universe, is a punisher keeping a meticulous tally of your mistakes.
Just waiting for you to mess up.
Exactly. Or the idea that the universe plays favorites, that some people are just destined for luck and others are destined to suffer. Or my favorite classic image, God as an old man sitting on a cloud looking a bit like a member of ZZ Top, just waiting to strike you down if you violate a set of arbitrary rules.
Those images represent a tragic misunderstanding of spiritual physics. When you view the foundational energy of the universe as a judgmental entity, your brain's RAS will filter your reality to constantly search for evidence of judgment and punishment. You will live defensively. The source text offers a brilliant paradigm shift here, though. It suggests we look at figures like Jesus the way we look at Benjamin Franklin.
I found that comparison deeply illuminating.
Right. Because Benjamin Franklin didn't invent electricity. The electricity was always there, present in the atmosphere. What Franklin did by flying a kite in a thunderstorm was demonstrate its existence and its properties so that humanity could eventually harness it.
Right. He proved it was real and usable.
Exactly. Today, we use it to power our hospitals, heat our homes, and run our computers. We don't build shrines to the kite. The author argues that Jesus and other great spiritual teachers were doing the exact same thing with spiritual energy. They were demonstrating principles of the field of potentiality so that we could use those principles to heal, create, and live abundantly. They didn't want passive worship. They wanted active participation.
The book playfully paraphrases the message as, you too are da, man. Like you have the exact same access to the outlet. So to run the experiment for the dude abides principle, you have to treat this force with the same objectivity as electricity. You don't beg an electrical outlet to, like, please, maybe, if you've been a really good person today, toast your bread.
No, you just plug the toaster in.
You just plug it in. So the experiment asks you to give the FP a strict 48-hour ultimatum. You set a specific time frame, and you say out loud, I am giving you 48 hours to deliver a clear, unmistakable blessing or gift into my life. Something unexpected that I cannot write off as a coincidence.
The inclusion of a deadline is fascinating because it's not about being demanding. It's a psychological tool. Without a deadline, the human mind just wanders. We forget what we asked for. The 48-hour window creates a sense of urgency that forces your reticular activating system to open up and look for the result. It forces you to pay attention to your environment.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second. What if a listener sets the 48-hour timer, goes about their weekend, and Sunday night rolls around, and absolutely nothing out of the ordinary has happened? Doesn't that prove the field doesn't exist?
That is the exact trap of the filtered mind. If nothing appears to happen, the premise of the book suggests the failure isn't in the field's delivery, but in the observer's reception. The blessing was delivered, but your dial-up modem filtered it out because your neural pathways are still too strictly bound by skepticism or feelings of unworthiness.
Oh, so we just didn't see it.
Right, which is exactly why these experiments are sequential. Once you begin to force your attention outward with a deadline, you are perfectly primed to explore how deeply your beliefs dictate what you physically see.
That moves us logically right into the second concept, which is the Volkswagen Jetta principle. This is the assertion that you draw from the field based entirely on your expectations.
I'm sure you've experienced the phenomenon this principle is named after. You decide to buy a specific car. Let's say a Volkswagen Jetta. You think it's a fairly unique choice. But the moment you drive it off the lot, suddenly you see Volkswagen Jettas at every stoplight, in every parking lot, merging onto every single highway.
Yes. It's uncanny. It literally feels like the Matrix glitched and just spawned them all overnight.
But intellectually, we know the factory didn't manufacture thousands of Jettas overnight just to stock you. They were always there. What changed was your RAS. By making the car relevant to your identity, you told your brain's bouncer, hey, this specific data point is now important, so the brain stopped filtering it out.
That makes total sense.
And the book shares a striking anecdote that takes this from a mild quirk to a really profound behavioral issue. It describes an angry woman at an airport. She is hauling heavy luggage, sweating, swearing at the top of her lungs, and just complaining to everyone around her about how the airport shuttle bus is taking forever and how the service is completely unacceptable.
And the tragic comedy of the situation is that the shuttle bus is sitting exactly 5 feet in front of her. The doors are wide open. The driver is sitting there. It had even circled around the terminal twice while she was ranting.
Wow.
But because her internal state was so deeply committed to the narrative of struggle, anger, and victimhood, her brain literally filtered out the visual evidence of the solution. Her negativity didn't just ruin her mood. It physically blinded her to reality.
We treat stories like that as psychological blind spots, but the science indicates it goes much deeper into physical neurobiology. The text references a landmark 1970 experiment conducted by Cambridge neuroscientists Colin Blakemore and G.F. Cooper.
Oh, this is the kitten study, right?
Yes. They wanted to understand how environmental conditioning affects the physical wiring of the brain. So they raised a litter of kittens in complete darkness. They only exposed the kittens to light for a few hours a day, and during that brief window, the kittens were placed inside a cylindrical drum painted entirely with vertical black and white stripes.
So the only visual stimuli these developing brains ever received were vertical lines, nothing horizontal, no complex shapes at all.
Exactly. When these kittens matured and were finally brought out into a normal, complex visual environment, the results were astonishing. The kittens were completely blind to horizontal lines.
Completely blind.
Yes. They would walk into horizontal chair legs. They would trip over horizontal ropes stretched right in front of them. It wasn't that they were generally clumsy. The cortical cells in their visual cortex that normally process non-vertical orientations had literally failed to develop or had gone into hibernation.
Because their environment never demanded they see horizontal lines, their brains physically wired themselves to make horizontal lines invisible. That is wild.
There is a human equivalent mentioned in the text as well, involving the anthropologist Colin Turnbull. He was studying a pygmy tribe that lived their entire lives deep within the dense, visually restricted environment of the Ituri forest. The visual horizon was always just a few feet away, blocked by dense foliage.
Okay.
Turnbull took one of the tribesmen, a man named Kenj, out of the forest and onto a wide open savanna for the very first time. Kenj looked out across the plain, saw a herd of buffalo grazing several miles in the distance, and asked Turnbull what kind of insects they were.
Wait, he thought buffalo were insects?
He genuinely believed they were ants. Because he had never lived in an environment that required distant depth perception, his brain lacked the neural software for size constancy over distance. He only saw what his brain was conditioned to see.
These aren't just fascinating scientific anecdotes. They are profound warnings about our own lives. I mean, we are the kittens. We're the tribesmen on the savannah. If you have been raised in an environment that modeled financial scarcity, toxic relationships, or chronic stress, your brain has pruned its neural pathways to only recognize those things. You are bumping into the chair legs of abundance every day and completely failing to see them.
So how do we force the brain to see horizontal lines? That's the action of the second experiment.
Yeah.
You give your brain a specific, unusual command. For the first 24 hours, you instruct your conscious mind to look exclusively for sunset beige cars. Not silver, not white, sunset beige.
Super specific.
Very. Then, for the subsequent 24 hours, you shift the command and look exclusively for yellow butterflies or purple feathers. You actively force your reticular activating system to let a bizarre, highly specific piece of data through the filter.
And you will find them. You will see sunset beige cars everywhere. But okay, I have to stop here and push back. Because any listener with a background in psychology or statistics is screaming at their device right now. This is just confirmation bias.
Naturally.
Right. Like, if I decide today that I'm going to look for people wearing red hats, my brain will spot red hats. It doesn't mean I magically summon red hats out of the ether using a spiritual field. It just means my brain is highlighting what was already statistically present. Doesn't acknowledging confirmation bias completely debunk this entire premise?
That is the most common critique, absolutely.
Right.
And it requires requires a real paradigm shift to answer. I would argue that it doesn't debunk the premise at all. It actually reveals the mechanism. Yes, it is confirmation bias. But we treat confirmation bias as if it's merely a flaw in human reasoning, like a cognitive error to be corrected. In the realm of quantum physics, that bias, the act of directed observation, is the very engine of reality.
How so? Explain that leap from a cognitive error to a quantum engine.
In quantum mechanics, before a particle is observed, it doesn't exist in a fixed state or a fixed location. It exists as a wave of probability, a superposition of all possible outcomes. This is the famous double-slit experiment. The particles are essentially dancing in a state of infinite potential.
Okay, I follow you.
But the exact moment an observer measures or looks at the system, that wave function collapses into a single, solid, physical point. The observer's attention forces the universe to make a decision. The observation itself solidifies reality. So when we talk about confirmation bias, we're talking about human observation. Your bias is your observation.
Oh, wow. So you're suggesting that by choosing to bias our attention toward sunset beige cars, or more importantly, toward love, abundance, or opportunity, we are actively collapsing quantum waves of probability into a reality that serves us.
Precisely.
And conversely, the angry woman at the airport is collapsing waves of probability into a reality of frustration.
Yes. You aren't just noticing what is already there. Your observation is participating in bringing it into a localized, experienced reality. To illustrate how powerfully this can scale up, the text points to the Findhorn community in Scotland.
This story is incredible.
It really is. In the early 1960s, a family, Peter and Eileen Caddy, moved to this desolate, wind-blown trailer park near the North Sea, right next to a literal garbage dump. The soil was essentially sand and gravel. Agricultural experts visited and declared the land completely barren. Nothing of substance would ever grow there.
But this family was destitute. They had kids to feed. They didn't have the luxury of accepting the agricultural experts' reality.
Right, so they started a garden, but they approached it fundamentally differently. Instead of fighting the barrenness, they aligned their consciousness with the spiritual truth of the field of potentiality. They focused their intent entirely on life, vitality, and abundance. They biased their observation toward growth.
And in this dead, rocky, sandy soil, they began to yield impossible results. They didn't just grow enough food to survive. They grew 40-pound cabbages. For context, an average cabbage is maybe 3 or 4 pounds.
10 times the size.
They grew 65 different types of vegetables and 21 varieties of fruit. It became so famous that soil scientists came to study it and could find no material explanation. Today, thousands of people make pilgrimages to Findhorn. They collapsed a quantum wave of impossibility into a miraculous physical reality simply by rigorously holding their focus.
That transition from merely observing reality to actively shaping it is where this framework gets profoundly weird and profoundly exciting. Once you prove to yourself that your perception alters what you experience, you have to look inward. You have to understand how your physical body is interacting with this field. This takes us to the next phase of the experiments, realizing that you are the magnet.
This begins with the Albee-Einstein principle. It states a fact that is scientifically undeniable but perceptually ignored. You, as a human being, are a field of energy.
We all know the formula, right? EMC Baya. We learn it in grade school. But we tend to compartmentalize it as something that applies to atomic bombs or stars, not our own flesh and blood. Body means that energy and mass are two forms of the exact same thing. They're interchangeable.
You look in the mirror and see solid matter, skin, bone, hair. But you are not solid. You are a dense, vibrating mass of energy, and the sheer volume of that energy is terrifying. The book notes that an average-sized adult human contains roughly 7 times 10 to the 18th power joules of potential energy.
It is a staggering figure to try and comprehend.
The author puts it in terms that really wake you up. That amount of energy, 7 times 10 to the 18th power joules, is the equivalent of the explosive force of 30 large hydrogen bombs.
30.
That is what is locked inside the matter of your body right now.
At the subatomic level, there are no solid particles. If you zoom in close enough on an atom, it is almost entirely empty space, filled with pure, unbounded energy vibrating at different frequencies. You are quite literally a localized pattern of energy. And because you are energy, you operate on the laws of resonance and frequency.
Right.
When you experience emotions like joy, deep gratitude, or intense excitement, your energy field vibrates at a very high, rapid frequency. And just like acoustic resonance, that high frequency magnetizes other high frequency patterns to you.
Like striking a tuning fork in a room full of other tuning forks. Only the ones calibrated to that specific pitch will start to vibrate in response.
Exactly. And conversely, if you are consumed by terror, guilt, resentment, or a constant expectation of disaster, your energy field slows down. It vibrates at a low, dense frequency, and it acts as a magnet for events, circumstances, and people that match that dense pitch.
But again, this sounds like New Age theory until you test it. So how do we prove our energy fields are reacting to our thoughts? The experiment for this relies on a tool called Einstein wands. And you don't need a sophisticated laboratory for this.
No, it's very DIY.
Very. You go to your closet, take a wire coat hanger, and cut it into 2 L shapes. You take 2 plastic straws, the book jokingly specifies McDonald's straws, and you slide the long end of the wire into the straws. This allows you to hold the straws firmly while the wire can swing freely without friction from your hands. You hold them out in front of you, parallel, like a gunslinger.
What you are building are essentially dowsing rods.
Right. And here is where you test the electromagnetic response of your body. You stand perfectly still, hold the wand steady, and then you vividly, intensely recall a highly negative, painful memory, like a moment of intense shame or fear. As you sink into that feeling, your electromagnetic field physically contracts.
Because your energy is shrinking.
Exactly. And because your body's energy field is shrinking, the wands will actually cross inward, pointing at each other. Then you shake it off, reset, and shift your focus entirely to a joyous, expansive, loving memory. As you generate the feeling of joy, your energy field expands outward and the wands will swing open, pointing away from each other. You can physically watch a metal wire respond to the invisible electromagnetic shifts generated by your thoughts in real time.
It is a beautiful demonstration of the mind-body connection.
Yeah.
And it sets the stage perfectly for the next step, which is the abracadabra principle. Most people think of abracadabra as a nonsense word magicians use when pulling a rabbit out of a hat. But the word actually traces back to an Aramaic phrase that translates literally as, I will create as I speak.
I love that.
The principle here is that whatever you consistently focus your energy on will expand in your life.
But the statistics on our mental focus are incredibly depressing. The average person has about 60,000 thoughts a day. But the tragic part is that cognitive research shows up to 98% of those thoughts are the exact same thoughts we had yesterday and the day before that. We are caught in a massive neurological rut.
A huge rut.
We desperately want to change our lives. We want new outcomes, but we are broadcasting the exact same 58,000 worried, repetitive, low-frequency thoughts into the field every single day.
The author draws a parallel here to Newton's third law of motion, which states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. In the framework of the field of potentiality, this translates to Newton's third law of prayer. Every thought you have is essentially a prayer, an energetic action, and the field provides an equal and matching reaction. It responds in kind.
It is the ultimate form of radical accountability. If you are constantly ruminating on how broke you are or complaining that you will never find a healthy relationship, you aren't just venting. You are actively praying for poverty. You are actively praying for loneliness. You are focusing your immense energy on those states, and the universe says, abracadabra, I will create as you speak, more poverty coming right up.
And the reason we fail to manifest what we actually want is because of conflicting intentions. The book uses a very grounded geographical analogy to explain this. Imagine you are walking from Biloxi, Mississippi to New Orleans.
Okay, let's say Biloxi represents your current unsatisfactory life. You're driving a beat-up car, you're in a dead-end job, and you're lonely. New Orleans is the goal. New Orleans is the dream career, the amazing partner, financial freedom. So you decide to leave Biloxi and walk to New Orleans. You start walking. You are focused on the goal.
But after a mile or two, you look around. The scenery is completely unfamiliar. The road is dark. You start to get tired. Your legs ache, and your subconscious mind panics. It says, we don't know this road. What if New Orleans is terrible? What if we fail? Let's just go back to Biloxi. Yes, Biloxi is miserable, but at least we know the misery in Biloxi. We know how to survive it. And so you literally turn around and walk back to your comfort zone.
We do this energetically all the time. We say we want the promotion, so we start vibrating at that frequency. But simultaneously, a deeper subconscious part of us is broadcasting fear. Fear that we aren't smart enough, fear that a new job means a longer commute, fear of public speaking. Our conscious mind is walking toward New Orleans, but our subconscious fear is dragging us backward to Biloxi.
And the field of potentiality doesn't judge which one is better. It simply matches your dominant, most consistent vibration. To ever reach New Orleans, you have to lock your focus entirely on the destination, even when the road feels unfamiliar and terrifying.
A perfect illustration of holding that pure focus without retreating to Biloxi is the story of Don and the Martin guitar. Don was a man who deeply wanted a specific high-end Martin guitar. These are beautiful instruments that start around $1,100, which was money he absolutely did not have.
Not at all.
But instead of letting his logical mind talk him out of it, instead of retreating to the Biloxi of, I can't afford it, he set a clear, unconflicted intention. He focused on the feeling of owning that guitar. He didn't stress about how the universe would deliver it, which is where most of us trip up. He just held the frequency of the what.
And the how turned out to be completely wild.
Mm.
A year goes by. Adult father is at a random garage sale and sees an old, beat-up guitar.
Yeah.
He thinks it would be a cute toy for Don's young daughter, so he haggles with the seller and buys it for $5. He gives it to Don. Don looks closely at this $5 toy and realizes he is holding a rare, vintage 1943 Martin 000-28. This is the exact model of guitar Eric Clapton plays. It was appraised at around $20,000. He collapsed the wave of probability. He kept his frequency purely aligned with the object, and the field delivered it through a channel his conscious, logical mind could never have engineered.
I love that story, but my absolute favorite anecdote regarding this principle involves a minister named Edwin Gaines. It beautifully demonstrates how to generate the frequency of the thing you want, even when your current reality is the exact opposite. Edwin was dead broke. She was struggling to keep the electricity turned on in her house.
Been there.
Right. But her spiritual mentor told her that if she wanted wealth, she had to stop vibrating at the frequency of poverty. She needed to practice feeling rich.
Which is incredibly difficult when you are facing shut-off notices.
Right. But she commits to the experiment. She goes to the grocery store, bypasses her usual survival diet of cheap beans and rice, and spends her last few dollars splurging on a jar of fancy almond-stuffed olives. She calls her friend Lana, they sit outside by Lana's pool, they drink a little wine, they eat these expensive olives, and they spend the entire afternoon playing a game of pretend.
That's so fun.
They visualize themselves as wealthy socialites vacationing in Mexico City. They completely immerse themselves in the feeling of luxury, laughter, and abundance.
They manufactured the electromagnetic signature of the reality they desired.
Exactly. And the domino effect that followed is hilarious. They generated so much joy that Lana actually decided to go book real tickets to Mexico City. A few days later, Lana's mother unexpectedly offered to pay for Lana's ticket. Now, Edwin is sitting there thinking, hold on, I bought the olives, I did the visualizations, where is my ticket?
She easily could have gotten better.
But she didn't retreat to Biloxi. She held the faith. Later that week, she walks down her driveway to check the mail and finds a letter from a former roommate she hadn't spoken to in 15 years. The roommate had recently sold some old furniture they had purchased together over a decade ago and felt compelled to track Edwin down and send her half the money.
You're kidding.
The enclosed check covered the exact cost of the plane ticket to Mexico City, down to the penny, with exactly $100 left over for spending cash. And the punchline. When Edwin and Lana finally sit down at a restaurant in Mexico City, the waiter brings out complimentary appetizers. A bowl of almond-stuffed olives.
It is a stunning example of nonlinear manifestation. You do not have to micromanage the universe. You just have to supply the frequency. The experiment for this principle puts that directly to the test. You pick a specific, believable item to manifest within 48 hours. It could be a front-row theater ticket, a specific breed of dog you want to see, or a unique flower. The critical instruction here is to pick something you don't carry a lot of limiting beliefs about. Don't start by trying to manifest $1 million because your subconscious mind will immediately panic and run back to Biloxi. Pick something light, something fun, and hold the focus without worrying about the how.
Okay, so up to this point, we've established that our perception is filtered, that we can change the filter, and that our focused energy can draw physical objects or circumstances toward us. But the next section of the source material, direct lines and altering matter, is where we cross a major threshold. We transition from drawing objects to drawing information, and then physically altering the cellular structure of the world around us. Let's look at the Dear Abby principle.
The Dear Abby principle asserts a very comforting idea. Your connection to the field of potentiality provides access to accurate, unlimited guidance for your life. The reason we struggle so agonizingly with decisions, should I take this job, should I end this relationship, should I move across the country, is because we rely entirely on our conscious mind to make the decision. Buddhist philosophy refers to this as the monkey mind.
The book uses a fantastic analogy here. It says that using your conscious mind to try and solve the deep, complex issues of your life is like trying to use fingernail clippers to cut a massive front lawn. It is fundamentally the wrong tool for the job.
It is. The conscious mind, the analytical brain, is brilliant at identifying problems and formulating structured goals.
Hmm.
But it's terrible at solving complex, multivariable life paths because it is strictly limited by past data. The moment you ask your conscious mind a question, it immediately starts weighing pros and cons based on your past failures, generating anxiety, and projecting worst-case scenarios. It cannot see past its own historical conditioning, but your inner guidance, your intuition connected to the FP, operates outside of time and has access to the entire field of information.
And yet, we completely ignore it. We put our own inner guidance on the do not call list because we've been conditioned to think that if God or the universe is going to speak to us, it has to be through a burning bush or the parting of the Red Sea. We expect booming voices from the clouds, but the text shows that guidance actually comes in incredibly practical, instantaneous, and mundane ways. The story of the actor Jamie Lee Curtis is the perfect example of this.
It is a story that completely defies logical decision-making.
Totally defies it. Jamie Lee Curtis was 25 years old. She was hanging out in her apartment with a friend who had brought over a copy of Rolling Stone magazine. Jamie Lee is just casually flipping through the pages, and she stops on a photograph of the actor Christopher Guest. She had never met him. She knew nothing about him. But she looks at the photo, points her finger at it, and says to her friend, "I am going to marry that man."
That is the voice of inner knowing. It bypasses the analytical mind entirely. If she had used her conscious mind, she would have said, he's a stranger, we work in a tough industry, the statistical probability of a successful Hollywood marriage is low. But the intuition just denies a fact.
And the amazing part is that she acted on it. She didn't let her conscious mind talk her out of it. She actually had her agent call his agent to leave her number. Now, he didn't call her back right away, which is usually when we would give up and assume our intuition was wrong, but she trusted the knowing. Eventually, they ended up running into each other at a restaurant. They locked eyes, fell in love, and were married 8 months after she pointed at that magazine. They've been married for decades. The guidance was instantaneous, clear, and perfectly accurate.
The experiment for the Dear Abby principle requires you to test this direct line. You take a troubling issue in your life, something you are genuinely stuck on. You formulate a specific yes or no question about it, and then you ask the universe for the answer, demanding a clear, neon sign response within 48 hours. You are explicitly instructed not to ask for a vague feeling or a subtle omen. You ask for a sign that is so blatant it cannot be ignored or written off as a coincidence.
Pam Grout actually details how she used this exact experiment early in her career. She was miserable working a part-time job and was trying to decide if she should take the terrifying leap and become a full-time freelance writer. She couldn't make the decision logically, so she asked the universe for a clear, undeniable sign within 24 hours. The very next day, she went to work and was fired.
Which feels like a disaster to the conscious mind.
Right. The conscious mind panics, but it was the exact, unequivocal answer she demanded. It was the brutal push she needed to launch what became an incredibly successful multi-book writing career. The universe answered, and it didn't stutter.
And if the field can deliver information that clearly, we have to ask what else it can do. This leads directly into the superhero principle, which takes the idea of your thoughts impacting reality and applies it to physical, molecular matter. The hypothesis is that your consciousness doesn't just guide you mentally, it alters the physical structure of the world around you.
This brings us to the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto. If you are listening to this and you haven't heard of his water crystal experiments, you need to look up the photographs after this deep dive. Dr. Emoto was a Japanese researcher who spent 15 years studying the energetic properties of water. He would expose glasses of water to different words, different types of music, and directed human thoughts. Then he would freeze the water and examine the resulting ice crystals under a powerful microscope.
The visual evidence he produced is deeply unsettling to a purely materialistic worldview. When he exposed the water to positive, high-frequency words like, I love you, peace, or thank you, the water froze into beautifully complex, perfectly symmetrical, brilliant hexagonal crystals. They looked like exquisite snowflakes.
But when he took water from the exact same source and exposed it to hatred, by taping words like I hate you or you fool to the glass or having people project anger at it, the frozen water could not form symmetry. It formed ugly, asymmetrical, dark, jagged blobs. The energy of the human intent literally changed the molecular geometry of the water. He even played Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel to a sample, and the resulting crystal literally split right down the middle.
We can try to understand this through the lens of cymatics, the study of how sound frequencies alter matter, like sand on a vibrating metal plate forming geometric patterns. But Emoto's work suggests that intent itself carries a physical frequency that alters molecular bonds, and the implications for human health are staggering.
That's exactly where my mind went. The human body is roughly 70% water. If a glass of water turns into a jagged, chaotic blob when exposed to the words, "I hate you," what do you think is happening inside your physical body when you look in the mirror every morning and say, "I hate my thighs," or "I'm so stupid," or "I look so old"? We are literally projecting destructive frequencies into our own cellular water. Our negative self-talk is physically degrading our cellular structure every single minute of the
It
day.
is a sobering realization. Our biology is constantly eavesdropping on our psychology. Our bodies are dutifully following the blueprints that our thoughts provide. But the reverse is also true, which means incredible, seemingly impossible healing is within our grasp. The text shares the extraordinary story of a man named Terry McBride. Terry had a severe degenerative condition, and his medical records literally stated that he was incurable. Over the course of 11 years, he endured 30 major surgeries. He was living with a colostomy bag. At his lowest point, 5 doctors stood in his hospital room and definitively told him there was no medical way he would ever come out of this hole. They told him to face reality.
But Terry understood the principles we are talking about today. He refused to accept their diagnosis as his ultimate reality. He looked at those doctors and announced that there was a higher power in the universe, a spiritual law that he was going to use to make himself whole. And he went to work. He affirmed his health relentlessly. He visualized his body functioning perfectly. When friends and family told him he was in denial and needed to accept his fate, he told them, "I am not my medical records. I live in a spiritual universe, and spiritual law can set me free."
He was overriding the low-frequency data of his disease with the high-frequency data of wholeness. And after 30 surgeries, long after medical science said he should have surrendered, he walked out of that hospital a completely healthy, fully whole man, entirely free of the colostomy bag. He literally re-engineered his physical reality with his consciousness.
To test this localized power yourself, Experiment 6 involves a classic grade school science project. You take an empty cardboard egg carton, fill the 12 slots with potting soil, and plant green bean seeds in each one. For 7 days, you treat the carton like 2 different realities. You direct intense, positive intention to the seeds on the left side. You talk to them, you will them to grow, you send them love and positive vibes. You ignore the seeds on the right. The hypothesis is that the seeds on the left will physically outpace the seeds on the right, purely based on the energetic nourishment of your directed attention.
And you don't even have to wait 7 days to feel this interaction with matter. You can test it on your own body immediately using applied kinesiology, often referred to as muscle testing. The premise here is that your nervous system is essentially an electrical circuit, and cognitive dissonance, like telling a lie, creates an electrical short in the circuit, temporarily weakening your muscles.
I know a lot of people dismiss muscle testing as the ideomotor effect, the idea that you are just unconsciously moving your muscles because you know what the outcome should be. But when you actually do the experiment, the physical drop in strength is startling. You make a ring with your thumb and middle finger on both hands and link them together like a chain. You pull slightly so there is tension. Then you state an absolute truth aloud like your real name. "My name is John." Your muscles remain stable and hold the ring tight. But if you state a blatant falsehood like, "My name is Julia Roberts," and pull with the exact same tension, your fingers will suddenly break apart. Your body's bioelectric field instantly weakens when exposed to the low frequency of a falsehood. It's wild to actually feel your physical strength evaporate based on a spoken word.
It proves that our physical form is deeply entangled with our mental and energetic outputs. Which brings us to the final phase of our deep dive, where we scale these concepts up. We move from seeds, water, and muscles to our metabolism, our telepathic connections to other human beings, and our ultimate worldview.
Let's start with metabolism, because Experiment 7, the Jenny Craig principle, is going to fundamentally challenge everyone who has ever obsessively counted a calorie, gone on a restrictive diet, or cursed their bathroom scale.
The prevailing mechanical view of nutrition is that food is just a static lump of calories and nutrients, and weight loss is simply a math equation of calories in versus calories out. But this principle asserts that food is dynamic energy. And more importantly, how your body chemically processes that food is deeply affected by the thoughts and emotions you are generating while you consume it.
To back this up, the book references a truly bizarre and fascinating experiment conducted at the Institute of Heart Math. Researchers there study the electromagnetic field of the human heart and how it interacts with the environment. In one experiment, they hooked up bioresponse electrodes to a bowl of yogurt. Now, yogurt is full of living bacteria, but it doesn't have a brain, it doesn't have a nervous system, and it is basically an inert blob in a bowl. A man sat in front of the yogurt, not touching it, and the researchers began asking him questions to elicit an emotional response. When they brought up his lawyer, a man with whom he was currently having a highly stressful and contentious conflict, the needle on the meter attached to the yogurt oscillated wildly.
The living bacteria in the yogurt were reacting in real time to the electromagnetic stress field generated by the man's heart and brain. And this builds on the incredibly famous, controversial work of CIA polygraph expert Cleve Baxter in the 1960s. Baxter famously hooked up lie detector machines to the Dracaena plants in his office. He discovered that the plants reacted physiologically not just when he physically burned a leaf, but the exact moment he merely thought about harming them with a match. The plants perceived human intention before any physical action was taken.
So, if a house plant and a bowl of yogurt can read our stress and our hostile intentions, think about the biological implications of sitting down to eat a piece of chocolate cake while your internal monologue is screaming, "This is going to make me so fat! I have no willpower! I am ruining my diet! I hate myself!" You are taking physical matter, infusing it with highly toxic, low-frequency, stressful energy, and then putting it into your body. Your body's metabolism reacts to that stress. The food picks up your negative vibe, and when you digest it, it ricochets that stress right back into your cells, raising cortisol levels and actively promoting fat storage.
You are weaponizing your own food against your metabolism. Therefore, the experiment for the Jenny Craig principle is a 72-hour energetic diet. For 3 solid days, you refuse to speak a single negative word about your physical body. No complaints about your weight, your skin, or your shape. Furthermore, before you take a single bite of food, you pause and consciously infuse it with love, gratitude, and blessings. You thank the food for nourishing you. You drop the guilt entirely. The hypothesis is that simply by removing the toxic energy that has been fighting your metabolism, your body will relax, your digestion will optimize, and you will lose at least 1 pound in those 3 days without altering a single thing you actually eat.
From the boundaries of our own skin, we then move outward to the wider web of humanity with Experiment 8. The 101 Dalmatians Principle. This deals with one of the most mind-bending, reality-breaking concepts in modern physics, quantum non-locality.
Also known as Bell's theorem. If you want to understand how interconnected the universe is, this is the science that proves it. Non-locality states that 2 quantum particles that have previously interacted remain intrinsically entangled forever. If you separate those 2 particles by 10 feet or by 10,000 miles, and you alter the spin or state of particle A, particle B will alter its state in the exact same way, at the exact same moment.
It happens instantaneously, faster than the speed of light. It completely defies the classical Newtonian idea of cause and effect, where a signal has to travel through space from point A to point B. Einstein hated this concept. He called it spooky action at a distance. But it has been proven repeatedly in laboratory settings.
The author names it the 101 Dalmatians Principle, referencing the Twilight bark from the classic cartoon. In the movie, a dog in London barks a message, a dog in the countryside hears it and barks it to the next dog, and so on. But quantum physics says that in our universe, the dog 100 miles away knows the message instantly, without the sound ever having to travel through the air. At a subatomic level, there is no separation. We are all entangled within a singular underlying universal energy field.
And when you realize this, you understand that help and abundance can come from literally anywhere, instantly. The story of Martha Beck illustrates this beautifully. Martha Beck was a highly trained Harvard sociologist. Her entire academic background trained her to rely strictly on hard Baconian logic and empirical data. She absolutely did not believe in anything she couldn't measure or see, but she went through a period of intense personal crisis, facing deep despair, poverty, and physical exhaustion.
She was pushed past the limits of her logical mind's ability to cope.
Yes, and in that space of surrender, impossible, deeply entangled things began happening to her. On a morning when she was literally about to pass out from hunger and had no money, a woman she barely knew inexplicably showed up on her doorstep carrying bags of groceries. Later in her life, she describes an unseen force, a distinct intuitive push that guided her and her daughter out of a smoke-filled apartment building right before it erupted in flames.
Her experiences forced her to realize that despite the cynical, rational defenses we build, we are held in a web of profound care. The universe functions as a holistic system. When a part of the system is in need and when it aligns its frequency to receive, the system responds. Often this happens through the sudden kindness of strangers or inexplicable synchronicities that logic cannot account for.
To test this entanglement yourself, you run a telepathy experiment. You pick a specific person in your life. The book suggests someone you've actually met in person, because physical contact ensures your quantum particles have already interacted and are entangled. For 48 hours, you use focused, intense intention to send them a specific message or command to take a specific action. Something simple like, call me, or bring home a loaf of bread. You visualize them clearly, you send them feelings of love and blessing to raise the frequency, and you transmit the message purely with your mind. You wait to see if the entangled particle on the other side of town responds.
Which brings us to the culmination of this entire journey, the final experiment, number 9, the fish and loaves principle. Every experiment we've discussed so far leads to dismantling the single greatest illusion of modern human existence, the myth of scarcity, the myth that there is not enough.
We live our lives like a frantic, terrifying game of musical chairs. The music is playing and we are circling the chairs sweating, terrified that the music is going to stop at any second and we will be the one left without a seat. We are culturally conditioned to believe there isn't enough to go around. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough good jobs, not enough love. It is the default operating system of our entire global economy.
But the source material argues that scarcity is a total fabrication. It is a perceptual filter. To illustrate an alternative, the book contrasts our modern anxiety with the historical lifestyle of the Chumash Indians who lived along the coast of California. The Chumash lived in a true economy of abundance. They recognized that the ocean and the land provided everything they needed. They didn't hoard. They didn't build massive silos of wealth out of fear of the future. They only took what was required for the day, and they spent the vast majority of their time making art, building community relationships, and resting.
They didn't perceive scarcity, so they didn't experience it. We perceive scarcity, so we hoard resources, which creates actual scarcity for others, confirming our belief. It's a vicious cycle. The author uses a brilliant analogy about the board game Clue to explain how we trap ourselves in these cycles. She was playing Clue with her daughter and her daughter's friends. At the start of the game, she casually suggested that maybe someone other than the Miss Scarlet piece should go first. The kids were absolutely horrified. They yelled, "No, Miss Scarlet must go first, and you can only use the secret passage between the kitchen and the study." Why? Why are those the rules? Simply because a piece of paper printed in a factory and placed in the box says so.
We live our real lives bound by these arbitrary Clue rules. We believe that struggle is mandatory, that work must be miserable, that sickness is inevitable, and that wealth is only for the lucky few. Why? Because society handed us a rule book when we were born, and we never questioned it. If we want to access the field of potentiality, we have to tear up the rule book. We have to rip up the rules we've unconsciously agreed upon.
And to do that, the final experiment requires you to aggressively reprogram your reticular activating system to see the abundance that is already here. You keep a strict journal for 48 hours, but in this journal, you are only allowed to record acts of goodness, beauty, abundance, and kindness. Every single one you witness. A stranger holding a door open for you. The profound beauty of a sunset. A kind email from a coworker. The fact that clean water comes out of your tap whenever you want it. By forcing your brain to focus exclusively on grace and abundance, you collapse the quantum wave into a reality that is strangely, beautifully, endlessly accommodating.
When you combine all 9 of these principles, you undergo a complete paradigm shift. You stop being a passive victim of random circumstances. You stop complaining about the cold room and the missing buses, and you become an active, empowered scientist in the laboratory of your own existence.
That is exactly why E² matters so much, and why we wanted to do this deep dive today. It takes the esoteric, often frustrating concepts of spirituality and quantum physics, pulls them out of the clouds, and puts them right into your hands. You are the one who has to do the work. You are the one who reaches out and turns on the space heater.
Before we close, there is one final story that I think perfectly encapsulates the courage required to live this way. It's the story of the brilliant inventor and architect R. Buckminster Fuller. At the age of 32, Fuller's life was in ruins. He was completely bankrupt, unemployed, and deeply grieving the recent death of his young daughter. He found himself standing on the freezing edge of Lake Michigan, seriously contemplating jumping in and ending his life. But standing there on the edge, he had an epiphany. He realized his life didn't belong to him alone, it belonged to the universe. So instead of jumping, he made a radical, defining decision. He dubbed himself Guinea Pig Bee.
Guinea pig bee. He turned himself into an experiment.
Exactly. He dedicated the rest of his life, the next 56 years, to a single unwavering experiment. What can one penniless, unknown individual do to change the world on behalf of all humanity? He cast aside every limiting belief, every clue rule society had handed him. He treated his entire existence as a grand, fearless laboratory test of human potential. And Guinea Pig Bee went on to secure 25 U.S. patents, write 28 books, invent the geodesic dome, and profoundly alter how humanity understands design and sustainability.
He collapsed the wave of failure into a reality of global impact. And that brings us to the question you have to ask yourself today. What could your life become if you stopped playing by the rules of scarcity and started treating your life as a beautiful, fearless experiment?
And as you ponder that, consider this final thought. If quantum physics suggests that our observation solidifies reality, what happens to the parts of ourselves and the parts of our world that we actively refuse to look at? If our attention creates our reality, then our willful ignorance might be the very thing sustaining our deepest shadows. What miraculous potentials are waiting in the dark, simply waiting for you to bravely turn your attention toward them?
That is something to sit with this week. Remember, the space heater is right there next to you. All you have to do is reach out. If you want to keep experimenting, questioning, and expanding your mind with us, make sure to subscribe to the Book Nook so you never miss an episode.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.